Deadpan Ghosts is a horror media podcast and, as such, may feature discussion of mature or disturbing subject matter. A full list of content warnings for this episode can be found in the description. Hi, welcome to Deadpan Ghosts, a horror media podcast hosted by two ghoulish goofs, Vernon and their scared co-host, Jonathan. And today we are covering the 1984 classic horror comedy, Ghostbusters. Vernon, what did you think of this movie?
Wow. Thank you, Jonathan. This movie.
It's something.
What an experience.
So we don't know quite how to feel about the Ghostbusters, to be quite honest, all of the time. How are we going to get past this ideological barrier that we have as two fellow ghosts?
I definitely tried to keep an open mind and, let's see. Good luck, Ghostbusters. Impress me. Maybe you're really open-minded. But, they called us disgusting and, ugly, and they were working towards extermination.
Yeah.
Take aside the fact that I'm a ghost. As a human, I had sympathy for ghosts. As a living person, these characters are not depicted as having a lot of empathy for the undead.
No, and I think that's something that we're going to come across quite a bit on our journey here together. With that, I think we can start with maybe the beginning of the movie. Do you want to talk about how our main character, not necessarily the main character, but I suppose he does have lead billing, Bill Murray, who plays Dr. Peter Venkman. How is he introduced?
I believe that he is a science man who works at a university.
Sure, he's a parapsychologist, just like in Poltergeist.
Yeah, he says he's studying the effects of negative
reinforcement. Specifically on kind of psychic abilities, right?
Oh, yes, on ESP. And then we are shown what he does, and he has these two people hooked up to electric shock monitor things, and they're trying to predict what a card is that is turned away from them. This guy and this girl, and Bill Murray is positively reinforcing her theoretically, but it does not age well. I don't think Peter Venkman, Bill Murray's character, comes across charming anymore, unfortunately.
He's very much supposed to be charming, and but he is kind of a womanizer. He showers this girl with positive attention, makes the guy that came with her look bad. He leaves, and then he sits down with her, and he's like, "Oh, you've got something special. This is a real natural phenomenon, a downright phenomenon, right?" It's pretty uncomfortable. He's just trying to sleep with her, get in her pants, and.
Right, Ray shows up, and, he's very excited about their first big case with a ghost.
Right.
And I remembered these lines, so many of the lines, so clearly from my childhood that I could feel them coming. I was hearing them before they were hitting my ears.
Yeah.
But he goes, "I'm right in the middle of something, Ray," and he smacks Ray in the head. They smack each other several times throughout the movie.
Yeah, there's some good slapstick going on. And Dr. Raymond Stantz, he's played by Dan Aykroyd, of course.
Yeah, he's the most, or I thought he was going to be the most endearing.
He kind of is,
perhaps
in a way.
Harold Ramis has now become the most endearing character.
Right, well, with time, Harold Ramis, he plays Dr. Egon Spangler. He's the nerdiest of the group, and he comes up with all of their inventions, I think. At least that's the sense that I get watching the movie.
Egon was beautiful in this movie. He was dressed, his fit, as you would say, was fantastic. You know, he was giving like Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. I thought he was the sexiest man in the room, and he was just killing it.
He and Dan Aykroyd actually wrote the screenplay together, which is something that I had forgotten. I hadn't thought about it in a long time, that they were the two that wrote all of these great lines and all of these really good jokes and back and forths.
I think because we watched The Poltergeist last time and it was taking itself relatively seriously, that, you know, this is a comedy first and foremost, and I think even with the passion that Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis had, they are making fun of the characters that they're playing. You know, there's a self-awareness.
For sure.
Which maybe makes me want to, you know, be okay at their foibles, because they're all pretty imperfect and sometimes in the wrong.
Yeah, sometimes, a lot of the time, we might say. But basically, Ray does come into this scene where Venkman is testing these students at this college. He comes in and he's like, we need to find out what's going on at this library. We're getting a lot of reports from this library.
Right. Oh, yeah, some library.
Yeah.
The New York Public Library. Right?
That's right.
Yeah, they go there. Egon's already there. They interview this librarian who encountered a ghost. The music at the beginning of this movie is super stellar.
Yeah.
The music throughout, I think that the soundtrack is actually incredible, and it starts off great. The songs that were written for the movie are really good, but the eerie music is really whimsical and varied. It's not just a bunch of noise or tension building. Like, it's got some nice melodies. I absolutely love that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think the opening is the librarian walking through the library.
That's
and
right.
Some supernatural stuff starts happening.
Yeah, some books come out and they float across the way behind her. It's all kind of happening while her back is turned, and then, you know, slowly it starts ramping up. These files, or I don't know what they are, but these slips of paper, they start coming out of these file cabinets that are opening behind her, and they're like flying up in the air. It all looks really good.
It does.
And it's a really well shot and paced scene. It's a really good tone setter for the movie. You know, we're gonna get some spooky stuff, but not too scary.
One thing I'll say about Ray, or Dan Aykroyd, like, his invested interest in ghosts, I could feel like he said something about this library ghost in the first scene with Venkman when he comes into the office. He referred to it as and I wrote it down in my mental
I'm so glad you
notes.
did.
Yeah, he said he referred to it as a free-floating, full-torso, vaporous apparition.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I couldn't feel more seen.
Yeah,
honestly.
that's exactly what we are.
I mean, it did blow my mind a little bit. And I think, you know, since this movie, it's like, publicly it's knowledge that Dan Aykroyd is really, really into the supernatural, and, you know, comes from some dynasty of ghost hunters, I'm pretty sure. I don't know if those would be his words, but this did make me think that he knows what he's talking about. I thought it was a good start for him.
Yeah, you get the sense that his character certainly cares the most about this thing. He's all wrapped up in it, and his sense of self is all wrapped up in how he's doing in this profession. He wants respect, but obviously parapsychologists and ghost hunters, and they're not the type of servant that gets a lot of respect, not that type of civil servant. So
I guess that's the arc of the movie. They're starting off with ain't getting no respect, and then at the end everybody's cheering.
This is essentially Dan Aykroyd's fantasy, is kind of how I read it, of like, I feel like Dan Aykroyd has been living in this world in his head for a long time, and like, a part of him just really wishes that he could come out with his conspiracies and with his supernatural theories and reach some kind of uproarious, applauding audience like that, you know?
I definitely felt it.
And so it is a story of these underdogs getting the respect and the adoration that they deserve because they're purportedly doing a good thing. but obviously in the movie they lack professionalism. They're always destroying stuff, so there is some, pushback that they hit, right? And that comes in the form of a character that will come in later by the name of Walter Peck. He works with the EPA.
Right, the EPA is the bad guy.
Yeah, that's really funny. Isn't that
It's very ironic.
This is the second time we'll have made a Simpsons reference on the show, but isn't EPA the villain in the Simpsons movie?
With the dome.
Yeah, and they go EPA.
Yes, my brain juices have started to...
Yeah, they're flowing now, your ghost brain juices.
My ghost, my ectoplasmic
That's
juices.
where it
Thank
comes
you,
from.
Jonathan.
Yeah.
They mention Ray was studying sponges
Yeah.
that were migrating, and I wouldn't have caught this as a kid, certainly, but Venkman was just like, Ray, they only move like 1.5 feet, and that was a phenomenon that was described in the Poltergeist that those parapsychologists had studied previously, where you wouldn't notice it with the naked eye, but some object moved, a distance over a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And I liked that consistency
Yeah,
with
that's
the paranormal
interesting.
world's depiction.
Yeah, and much like in this movie, it's kind of a comedic thing where, it didn't really move very much at all, and so when they come into the home that is haunted by the poltergeists, they're like, oh, this is crazier than anything we've ever seen. Just like how in the library, Peter Venkman, he kind of is the one who doesn't believe all of this stuff. That's why he's kind of, scamming at the beginning a little bit. He kind of doesn't believe in this stuff totally, but he's going along with Dr. Ray and Dr. Egon Spangler, and I'm not really sure why. Why does Peter know these guys? Like, what's their history,
Well, I mean, I felt the long-term friendship between Bill Murray's character and Dan Aykroyd's character from being kids.
Yeah, I guess so.
I mean, the arc of Dan Aykroyd becoming a hero, or Ray, getting cheers, I felt there was a lot of interactions between those two characters kind of building that arc, and in the end it's a lot of like Bill Murray patting him on the back like, look, they love you, like, you deserve this,
That
enjoy
is
the
true.
moment.
He kind of doesn't like Harold Ramis's character, though. He has problems with Spangler a little bit.
Right, it's like Ray became friends with Egon later in life. And
Yeah.
now they're three friends. They're friends by association. Egon and Venkman.
It does kind of feel like that, but their respect for each other goes up a little bit by the end of the movie. It doesn't really focus on these things too much because it is mostly sticking to the comedy.
The library scene conclude like they encounter like a bookshelf falls down. Some books are stacked. Some very famous lines.
Yeah, of course, no human could stack some books like this.
Or listen, do you smell something? That's very popular in my household.
Yeah, listen, do you smell something? I also
back in the
noticed. I think for the first time I noticed that this
Oh,
time.
wow. But it concludes with they see the free-floating full-torso Vaporous apparition, and it's this, looks like an elderly woman. She's reading a book. She is chilling, straight up chilling.
Not doing anything.
And they show up, and she shushes them.
That's right.
I could never have more sympathy for a character. And Bill Murray, like, pulls Ray's ear and calls him Francine, which both offended me on different levels. And Ray is the one who comes up with the plan, and it is the punchline of the whole scene. And it's to say they all three approach this ghost woman slowly, and on the count of 3, Ray says, "Get her!" And I'm sorry. Nothing could have aged poorer. If 3 men approach you and say, "Get her," you are within your right to kill them. Okay.
Well, yes, this ghost didn't do anything to deserve this. It's not her fault that, she presumably died in this library. I think she was probably a librarian of some type, but maybe she was just somebody who liked that library. Or
crushed by a falling bookshelf.
could have been. Something like that, right? And she just is in that library reading books forevermore. She wasn't really trying to bother anybody, but you know how people act as soon as they see a ghost.
I did like their, this whole scene emotionally is these characters' first time seeing a ghost. And I think they all played it pretty fantastically to be blown away. And, I believe that they had never seen anything like that before. I thought they did really well.
Yeah.
Gotta be honest.
They're pretty good at playing it straight. But they fail in capturing her, right?
And they make it back to the university, and they're being kicked out right then by the dean.
That's right. They start off in pretty much already a fairly low spot, and then they're immediately fired from their jobs, and they're at an even lower spot. And I believe it was Peter Venkman's degree that got him a job there, and he associates with Dr. Ray and Dr. Egon. I don't think they have jobs there, do they?
He's like, you've never worked in the private sector. You've never left the school.
That's right.
So, I think so. That scene in which they've been fired and Ray and Venkman are outside somewhere, famous in New York probably. I really love his pep talk to Ray, and it reminded me of how I talk to you all the time.
Right. He is a good friend. Yeah. I think that is touching. Touching for sure.
Call it fate, call it luck, call it karma. Whatever you believe, everything happens for a reason. I think about that a lot since my whole life. That is a.
That's basically you getting me to do this podcast with you, right? You're like, look, we're just two ghosts, and whatever we believe, and whatever fate is, and.
Yeah, I think nothing's ever too late. We went our whole lives without doing a podcast.
Yeah, and much of our deaths too.
So it's not everything's always an option. But Ray asks him, how are we going to get the money? This ecto-containment thing, which is going to imprison ghosts, is going to cost a lot of money. And so they jump cut comedy smash to having just taken out a third mortgage on Ray's parents' house. And it is funny. It was a moment that reminded me, this is a comedy. Relax.
For sure. It's all comedy. And they look like buffoons much of the time. At the end of the day, I don't think that we can get too upset at Ghostbusters as a concept, because it is all fiction. And the truth is, these motherfuckers can't catch us. Right? Like, there are no real Ghostbusters. It's just kind of a spooky concept, two ghosts. But nobody...
Yeah, this is a horror movie.
Yeah, for us.
It does get a little horrifying.
It does, yeah. It has a scary scene near the end. And
so
that's...
after their... Yeah.
Well, Sigourney Weaver comes into...
Exactly. That is when Dana is introduced.
Yeah, and they're starting their business. They buy this old, rundown firehouse, right? A firefighter house that it has been.
Yeah, that scene is so nice. I mean, Ray is channeling pure childhood joy, Christmas morning
For
joy.
sure.
Does this pole still work? Classic.
Yeah.
And I love the relator. She's a famous, Seinfeld actress in my memory. And she's just smiling at them like their kid wants to live in this house, and they're the parents, Egon and Venkman. They're the odd couple. I really love...
Exactly.
I do really love that.
Yeah, that whole bit is good. But very soon after that, they put an ad on TV, and this is the dinkiest little, just trying to fill time kind of channel. They put their ad on that, and our new character, Dana Barrett, played by Sigourney Weaver, comes home to her apartment just in time to see it, and chuckles and turns it off just before some ghostly activity starts happening to her.
Yeah, this is one of the coolest scenes.
It is. Yeah, she puts her eggs on the table, and I'm not sure how they did this, you know.
Me neither. It's so
But
cool.
there must be some kind of heating under the counter or something like that.
I bet it's not real at all, and that the sizzling sound effect goes a long
Maybe
way,
so.
and that it's like it's rigged to kind of pop, and there's fake steam. But
And then they
I noticed that the State Puff marshmallows are right by them, and that they don't melt, and that's interesting.
Oh,
Like it's supposed to feel supernatural, as if like if you were to touch the counter, it wouldn't be hot.
for sure.
That's what I kind of got this
For sure, but it looked and felt good. The eggs start popping out of their shells after the lid of the container opens, and they're just like cooking on the countertop. And she's like, "What the fuck?" And then like some light starts coming out of her refrigerator, and she opens her refrigerator, and there's a big, scary, like gargoyle dog-looking creature, and it screams "Zool" at her, and then she screams and she shuts the refrigerator, and the next whenever chance she fucking gets, she's right there at the Ghostbusters office.
Yeah, she walks in to their office, and it made me kind of realize that this movie is structured like an old noir movie, in which Peter Venkman is our womanizing detective who doesn't take it all too seriously.
Wow.
We start with the cold open, which is the case that they're kind of in the middle of, and then the damsel in distress.
For sure. He goes with her to her apartment, and just to go back for a minute, she's talking to their new receptionist, Janine, when she comes in, who's played by Annie Potts, who will be important in a minute, but she's their first customer, so Peter like jumps up from behind some some short walls. And he
very spry. He
runs over and he jumps over like a rail, and that's his love at first sight scene basically. And he's like, "Oh, let me come with you to your apartment. We'll check." He says he says, I'm gonna go over to her apartment and check her out." And then she looks at him, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna check her apartment out, And so they go do that, and he's flirting with her the whole time, and she's obviously very uncomfortable, and she keeps having to rebuff him, which is a good point now, I think, to bring up Rick Moranis' character, who is another guy that lives next door to Dana Barrett in the apartment complex. He's Louis Tully is his name, and he also has a thing for Dana Barrett. Literally any time he hears her door open and shut, anytime he hears steps in the hall, he will come out of his apartment to talk to her. So he's like literally always like on guard, listening for Dana to be in the hall. And he is so invested in talking to her. He blows through all of her signals that she doesn't want to hang out, she doesn't want to come to his party later, but she's trying to be polite, and he is just head over heels and really, really, like, Louis Tully and Dr. Peter Venkman are the same character. It's just that Dr. Peter Venkman is supposed to be charming.
Oh.
Like, he bothers her just the same way Louis Tully is, but he's not a little short nerd freak. And so she eventually... Go ahead.
The apartment scene, it felt like they are talking about... They go to the kitchen, and they're talking about the case, and then there's this weird cut to where they're now in the living room, and he's kind of like really trying to win her over, and I felt like something was missing. And she was already trying to kick him out. It felt editorially like something was cut out of this movie.
Maybe. Yeah. There is kind of a moment where he's leaving, and then he comes back right away, and he's like, "You know what? I'm going to prove myself to you." And I think maybe it's just that tone shift there, where we're like, all right, he's going to leave her alone now. He did his little flirting. But no, he really, like, makes a speech of it. Comes back, and he's like, "I'm going to be your boyfriend. You'll see." It is that misplaced 80s confidence, that kind of myth that you have to be persistent in order to win the girl, when we all know how that goes.
Before we leave the apartment, as soon as he gets in there, he's doing some ghostly investigating, and the first thing he does, he sees a piano, and he lifts the lid, and he plays the highest two notes. Clink, 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 clink. And he says, "They hate this." Drives them nuts.
I like to torture them.
I love to torture
right.
them. And Jonathan, you know that I, before I was a ghost, was particularly sound sensitive as far as it goes. And ghosts,
Yep.
I've been making up that they are even more sound sensitive, and boom. I mean, I know Venkman doesn't know what he's talking about, but, it was very validating, and Venkman was just like, "Hate me, Vernon. It's fine."
Yeah.
And I did. I was like,
I told you.
I get. Oh.
Told you we weren't gonna like these Ghostbusters. The whole thing of the containment. They just build a box that puts these ghosts into, it's permanent imprisonment in in the basement of their firefighter station that they've revamped, right? And they just send them into there, and they're just gonna be there forever, I guess, is the plan. So, earlier you said that they're looking for extermination, there's no ghost that they're not going to catch. And very quickly in this movie, they start to, after all this stuff with Dana Barrett goes down, they have their first job, which is a big hit. And it starts to get them some attention from the newspapers and the TV news, all the media. Basically, they go to, where is it they go? They go to a famous
hotel
in New York, and they're talking to the, what do you call him? The hotel manager, who's played by Michael Ensign. He's really funny in all of his scenes. He's like, "We need to keep this discreet. Can you please, we've got these disturbances on floor, do you know which floor it was?"
It was the 12th floor, to imply that there's, supernatural things above it on the 13th floor.
I don't know if you no, but hotels are oftentimes
don't have a 13th
Yeah, exactly.
floor.
It's an old superstitious thing.
Right. So then the 12th floor just inherits all the supernatural.
I guess
grief.
so, yeah. So or it is technically, maybe it's technically the 13th floor when you consider that the lobby is actually the lowest floor of the hotel.
Right. Yeah, maybe. This hotel is probably the most iconic. Well, that's arguable, but it is a really good chunk of the movie.
And honestly, the sets that they have to work with and on location occasionally are really good. This whole thing feels so good. There's so many people inside, and they're all looking at the Ghostbusters because they come in full costume now.
Yeah, this is the costume reveal coming into the hotel lobby. This hotel is the introduction of Slimer.
Slimer, that's right.
And it's a horrifying depiction.
It is.
For the most famous ghost in this movie to be a glutton, like an embodiment of gluttony, eating the whole time. I'm not a big fan of noises, but eating, I can't. There's only 11 instances of eating, but it's kind of a lot. And a lot of them are brought to you by Cheez-Its and Twinkies.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of ad placement in this movie.
Which, good for them. I'm glad that this movie could get made. It is iconic for all the complaining I do.
Well, it has a huge production value. Think of just all the extras that they had to hire, and all of the streets they had to close off.
Yeah, the finale where the ground is being upheld, coming up and cracking and earthquakes looked fantastic and felt like we were really outside, on a city street.
Yeah. But Slimer, what his deal is that he's slimy and he's green. He's like a floating little bob, and he's just, the first thing they see him do is just shoving some food on a cart. He's just chowing down on it, even though it's all falling right through him, because we're spirits, we can't eat. But he seems to crave the old feeling of fullness, and so
that would imply some kind of eternal punishment. That is
Perhaps, yeah.
the punishment for gluttony is that you must indulge in that eternally.
Wow, yeah.
And this movie does get quite biblical. Like they say, they quote Revelations, and they convince the mayor of Judgment Day being upon them.
Yeah, they convince a lot of people of a lot of things because shit starts getting pretty crazy, and maybe here we can kind of get into some of what's going on to lead up to the end of the film.
Well, right. So the catching of Slimer is like the thing that proves them to the world. They start to get on one newspaper after the other, and so people start hiring them, and they catch and store more and more ghosts.
Right.
And this is this big montage that gets them on the cover of Time magazine and interviewed by, era appropriate interviewers. And at the end of the montage, they introduce Winston, Ernie Hudson's character.
That's right.
And I was shocked that it was this late into the movie. I think that to get into the Ernie Hudson, I'm pretty sure that this movie was originally written for Eddie Murphy.
Really?
Yeah, or I've heard this. I'm not making it up.
Right, right.
And that he backed out, and that when he was replaced, the role was reduced, and a lot of the funniest lines were given out to the other characters. And then ultimately, in editing and through production, Ernie Hudson was kind of pushed out of the way. Narratively, it feels like his character could have been brought on with Janine, which was after they buy the building and renovate it, and with the mortgage, the third mortgage. A lot of things people like about Ernie Hudson's character is that he's relatable, and he's like, I'm in it for the paycheck. If there's a steady, maybe I should get my own lawyer. Hey, I just joined these guys. Mm-hmm. Listen to me. I'm a normal person. And so I think that is appealing and a good thing he provides, but he still could have been in the hotel. He could have been there on the cover of Time magazine.
Yeah. And I don't like to bring this up all the time, but these are tropes.
He's spoken about this.
Yeah, there are tropes with these horror movies. There's a little bit of tokenism going on here, I think, but he is a great presence in the movie. And even with the stuff that he does get, I know it was cut down, but he really does make it feel rounded out. He is the character we needed here.
Yeah, I like him more than I love Harold Ramis, but I like him the most as far as the characters. He is the most realistic. The others feel like they are playing caricatures.
Right.
He's got every scene he is in is extremely famous. His first scene is being hired. The second scene is the Twinkie scene.
That's right. So, okay. Yeah, let's get into this. Pretty much after he comes on board, there starts to be a vibe in the movie. They start setting things up where it's like, oh my god, all this ghostly activity is going on all of a sudden. The Ghostbusters, they haven't had any success for a long time before the movie begins. And then all of a sudden, they get their business started up, and all of this ghost stuff is happening. And it's happening at alarming volumes. People are skeptical of the Ghostbusters, but they're calling in because they just know that there's something weird going on in their abode or somewhere else where they work, places like that. All over New York, shit is starting to get real with ghosts. And so the being in Dana's refrigerator, it has something to do with that. Zool has something to do with that. And Peter Venkman has been looking into this on the side because, of course, he's attracted to Dana and he wants to figure this thing out for her. So he reaches back out to her once he has more information for her. He tells her Zool is an old demigod worshipped by some kind of secret society.
There's a Gozer is the...
Yes, Zool is a being that works for Gozer.
Yeah, they drop so much lore.
and Gozer is the big bad demigod. Sumerian culture, I believe, is what they say. And his full name is Gozer the Destroyer, or no, Gozer the Destructor, right?
Gozer the Gozerian.
Is that right?
It was. I mean,
Wow.
it's an extended title, I think.
Yeah, he has he has multiple extended titles, and it's a lot.
But them trapping all these ghosts and stirring up all this ghost energy results in them being basically like challenged by this being is kind of the what the film builds to.
Right. And challenged by Walter Peck, who we talked a little bit about, played by William Atherton. He's the EPA guy, and he comes in just to be the most hateable son of a bitch you've ever met. Like, he's written to be and directed to be and performed extremely annoying. He's a man who's made of straw. I don't think I don't think there are very many officials in movies that get less respect than Walter Peck does. It's really funny.
He famously, was people kept shouting "dickless" at him.
Oh no!
In real life.
Oh no!
Which is,
Oh, that's just what happens.
Bill Murray is just getting at him this whole movie every chance he can.
That's rough. That's rough. He's just an actor. We don't blame any of the actors in this movie for, what the Ghostbusters do, except maybe Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah, I like that the plot of the movie is that the Ghostbusters messed stuff up.
They do mess a lot of stuff up.
Like, that even feels to be the opinion of the movie based on the depiction of the ghosts wanting to break free ultimately. Like, Walter Peck comes in and he gets warrants and he wants to flip the switches and turn the thing off that's holding the ghosts. And there's this tune that plays when it happens, and it's like it's like about like magic.
Right.
I mean, it made me feel like I was just like set free. So like I felt empathy in that moment from the film, and like these ghosts have been locked up and now they are, let go.
Maybe, but
I did like all
they're
that.
still gonna keep ghost busting after the movie ends. They're still the heroes of the story. You mentioned the song "Magic," which is an iconic song. There's another song in this movie near the end called "Save the Day" or something like that.
Oh yeah, how does it go?
It's something like "Save the Day." I can't even. I couldn't tell you. I think it's the worst song in the film, frankly.
Gosh, I heard all these songs. I thought it was the soundtrack was the best part of the movie, and I was like bopping in my chair the whole time. I mean, floating.
No, yeah, it's a good soundtrack. This is just one song I'm talking about. Since we're talking about the soundtrack, I do want to point out that, we have the Ghostbusters theme, which is performed by who?
It's on the tip of my ghost tongue. I didn't write it down, though.
Yeah, it's,
We should know.
We should say it. Let me use my ghostly powers here real quick. It's Ray Parker Jr.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
On the tip of my ghost tongue.
Tip of my ghost tongue, too. But
that song is iconic.
It is.
Probably on a lot of people's playlists. The like "Who You Gonna Call" song.
For sure.
And the bridge that connects the first 2/3 of this song to the last third of the song is where the iconic montage moment in which Ray is visited by a ghost in his sleep.
Right.
And I just think it's so ironic that now I'm not going to be able to hear that part of the song without knowing what it was covering.
Yeah. So in the middle of this montage, this is the same montage where they're getting notoriety for the first time, right?
Yes.
And so in the middle of this montage, the funniest thing they could think of to put in there is that Dan Aykroyd awakens in the night, and there's a beautiful woman spirit floating above him, and then she disappears. You can't see her anymore, but his belt starts to get undone. So Dan Aykroyd wrote in this movie, or maybe maybe Harold Ramis wrote it, but I don't see why it would. One of them wrote in this movie that Dan Aykroyd gets a blowjob from a ghost, and disrespect from me.
I think it was supposed to be a much longer scene as well, and that it was put into the montage as like a solution. Like, what are we gonna do with this thing we don't want to show all of?
Right. Well, they wanted to keep the movie PG too, I imagine, so they kept it as subtle as possible so kids didn't get it. But yeah, I guess when I was a kid, I didn't really notice that until I got older. No. But still, it's in the film.
So all of this spiritual energy convalesces and goes through the Gozerian, the Destructor, the gargoyles on the top of this building that is Dana's apartment, like, come to life.
Right. And after...
Scary. That's when the movie turns to scary, and I remember as a kid being like,
oh,
this is just a little much.
Wow.
Actually.
You know? But what happens to Dana is that at some point after she starts warming to Bill Murray's character, Peter Venkman, you know, he is able to get a date.
Somehow.
Right, some fucking how. He shows up outside her work, which is where we find out that she's like a musician in an orchestra. I don't know what she plays. We don't get any more information than that.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
Maybe she plays piano. There's a piano in her house, but...
Oh, you're a detective.
Piano? Is there a piano? An
orchestra?
orchestra?
That could be it.
I don't know.
But he said you were the best one in your row.
Yeah, like...
And she's like, most people can't hear me over the whole orchestra. She was charmed by him.
She was, but they don't.
In that
but
scene,
they don't have a row of pianos in an orchestra.
As far as I know, no.
So I don't know what she plays, but yeah, she's like talking to this guy who's like, he's kind of like getting cucked by Dr. Peter Venkman, just like Louis Tully is in a way. And he's like, oh, who's that guy? And she's like, oh, he's just a friend, an old friend. But you can tell that, like, you know, she's starting to fall for him. It's starting to work on her. All his bullshit is starting to work on her. But by the time he comes to her place for the date, she's already been, like, grabbed by a bunch of chair arms in the scariest scene in the movie.
It is really scary, yeah. and too physical for sure.
And right, one of them is actually like groping her.
Yeah. As a kid, it was like I would always look around. It was
a bit much.
It was too much
for sure. But she gets like sucked into the closet and basically becomes Zool, right? And so now she is the one who is possessed by Zool. She is the one who is awaiting the coming of Gozer. And he shows up to her apartment, and he knocks on the door, and she opens it, and her like hair is all puffed up, and she's got like this crazy dress on, and she's all sexualized because she's been possessed by a demon. A demigod,
Zool
right?
did her makeup.
Yeah, exactly. Zool did her fucking makeup and has, like, presented her as his puppet. And she answers the door, and she's like, are you the keymaster? And Peter is like, no. And she just shuts the fucking door in his face. So he knocks again, and she's like, are you the keymaster? And he's like, yes. And he comes right in.
Yeah, this gatekeeper keymaster thing is obviously a metaphor for sex.
For sure.
And it seems, this would go over my head as a kid, but it seems like these two, which are canonically called terror dogs, these gargoyles.
Yes.
The gargoyles, that they are meant to possess two people and have sex.
Exactly.
To summon the coming of Gozer, the Gozerian, the Destructor.
Yeah.
And the whole punchline of it is that Louis Tully is possessed by the other one.
Right. He is at his party, which is going on, and before Dana comes home, he of course tries to get her to come to the party. it's really funny because I was wondering who the fuck are Louis Tully's friends, but then it cuts.
He
It
explains
cuts to the party later, and he's like, "Oh, I'm able to, get all of this off of my taxes. That's why I invited clients instead of friends." And so,
Right, he could write it
so
off.
everybody at the party is like old, and they've all got glasses, most of them, and they're just like people who need an accountant.
And none of them know each other.
Exactly.
I've heard that he improv'd a lot of the introductions of people, and he would just kind of
Oh wow.
give explanations to their monetary situation. He would just make up stuff. A lot of this movie had
Right.
it was really well edited. I want to preface that,
Yeah.
but it did have a slapped together feel sometimes. As an editor,
Well, yeah.
I could see really well hidden usages of the best stuff that they got, and I think it was expertly put together, but it seemed that they were kind of just running with a vibe sometimes. Like, there were some moments that were clearly written in a script, and some moments that where Bill Murray was let loose.
Well, that's how comedy comes together a lot of the time, is that the actors and the director, they find themselves having to punch things up. We haven't mentioned the director of the movie, by the way. His name is Ivan Reitman, and I might as well use my ghostly powers to recall what else he is responsible for.
Responsible.
Yeah, as far as Rick Moranis goes, he is, quite the actor, quite the improv comedian as well. We all miss seeing him work, but he is also, he has reasons why he hasn't been working in a long time.
I'm happy for him
sure.
to get
I said
out.
this to you the other day, Vernon, but yeah, I believe his wife or partner passed from cancer, and he just decided to take care of his kids after that and spend more time with them.
Man.
So that's great, and he's a great dude.
Yeah, absolutely. Spaceballs, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Oh, yeah.
I know this. I mean, I know I shouldn't just list everything, but he made a big impact, big splash when I was
So
a
many
kid.
good comedies, and he's just a small part of this one, but he's pretty much perfectly cast for his role. Some other things Ivan Reitman is responsible for. Stripes, that's Bill Murray. He did Twins with Arnold.
Oh,
He is responsible for Ghostbusters 2 as well.
responsible.
He's responsible for that. I think he's involved.
You haven't seen.
He's involved with the newer ones too, but I have not gotten to see those. I've only seen the first Ghostbusters.
That is significant for our Ghost channel for you not to have seen any of the subsequent movies. I certainly haven't seen the two Paul Rudd, any of the Paul Rudd trilogy.
Right.
I did see the Kristen Wiig 2016 one on a plane at an angle with one headphone in, and so it was pretty good.
I am excited to get there eventually. A few more things with Ivan Reitman. We got Kindergarten Cop Jr. He worked with Arnold a few times here. And
Are you looking for something specific?
no, but I the last thing I want to say is that he was also a producer on Animal House and Space Jam, which is pretty crazy.
Wow. Yeah, my dad loves Animal House and Stripes. These are definitely impactful.
Stripes is one that I missed. I think I saw Good Morning Vietnam, but I don't know how related those movies are.
I think they're in the same cinematic universe.
I just mean that, they have kind of similar covers, and they both star comedic actors. Back to this movie.
Bill Murray's Peter Venkman arrives for his date. He has flowers. He's well dressed, unbuttoned, and she's possessed. I can praise the performance of Bill Murray for immediately registering
Yes.
that her advances on him were not her own.
Yes.
And it's a mixed bag of a scene
Be-
in total, because he
Right.
inevitably makes her unconscious with drugs of an amount that he's administered?
For sure.
Where the fuck did he get these drugs?
Yeah, did he have that?
It's even an ADR line, like it was kind of, they were panning to him, but it was off screen. I could tell the difference in the sound quality between that and what he was about to say.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why they felt that explanation was funny or good, but,
Yeah,
you know.
I don't know. Yeah, like...
Sigourney Weaver is knocking her being possessed role out of the park. I think her performance in this movie is like she's in a real movie.
Yeah. She makes any movie that she's in better. Automatically. And this movie is already pretty good, you know, for all our gripes with it. But, yeah, he brought that, I guess? He brought those drugs. So, okay.
I mean, I don't know what explanation people make up.
Right.
But I don't think... I mean, the movie does not provide one.
No.
And it's just insane.
It is. But he does not, you know, take advantage, you know, which is good. It feels a little bit like he almost wants to let it happen, though. You know, I'm not gonna give him a complete...
Yeah, because she's possessed, he treats it like no one else is in the room, and he's kind of talking to himself, and he's like, should I? Oh, do it. Like, he's playing devil on his shoulder and being comedic for us.
For sure.
But it doesn't age well.
This is, it's a sex comedy. A lot of sex comedies have not aged well.
Yes, sex comedy.
It is, well, you were just talking about how the gatekeeper and the keymaster are an explicit reference to sex. And,
right.
You know, not that this is a sex joke, but the whole crossing of the streams thing, which we haven't talked about yet, that's obviously just a huge dick and pissing joke.
I mean, I thought it was a gay thing, to not to ruin everybody's straight bubble, but I thought that Ray and Venkman looking in each other's eyes like, if this is the end of the world, we're gonna touch our dicks together, all four of us.
Well, okay, maybe, but crossing the streams, okay, but maybe metaphorically.
I know that term does mean pee.
Right.
I get it, that there's confusion, but my interpretation.
Yeah, I suppose metaphorically, what you're getting at here, there is kind of like a moment where all of their concerns about how male friends are supposed to interact goes away, right? Where these four guys, or at least three of them, get to stand together and go like, hey, I love you guys. Because you know, Winston, he just met these guys. And I'm sure that, you know, he's got some form of respect for them. He has a nice speech near the end after Walter Peck blows up their ghost box. They do get arrested shortly, and then they get to talk to the mayor, and the mayor is like, get Walter Peck out of here, because they convince him to let them save New York City, because shit really is getting real now.
But it was like, you could be in charge of saving all these millions of voters.
Yeah, there's some good there's some good satire.
It's like against the EPA.
For sure. And this Catholic priest comes in, or I guess he's a bishop or something like that, right? I don't know exactly what his role is, but he seems like he's got a high station. And he comes in and he's like, you know, the church won't let me say anything officially about, you know.
But I think this is a sign from God.
Exactly. The church won't make an official statement on what these spiritual occurrences imply, but I think it's a sign from God.
He says.
Yeah, the phenomenon.
Yeah, I did like that, you know, that there were people in the streets afterwards, you know, of all denominations, you know, reacting to
that was cool.
This. And the world reacting to the Ghostbusters existing is kind of one of the more interesting things in this movie.
I think so, yeah. And like we said, they all end up cheering for the Ghostbusters by the end. It's Dan Aykroyd's dream come true. Well, they do cheer for him when they show up to the apartment complex that Dana lives in. You know, shit's shooting out from the top of it. Then they go inside. They have to climb all these stairs, and they get up there.
Iconic moment. Everybody loves the stair moment. Let's just blow on past it. Yeah, there's some stairs.
It is a funny moment.
You know,
He says,
the movie is supposed to be about like schlubby plumbers, but
yeah,
with ghosts, and so that moment is like, you
it's
know,
the hardest part of the job for them, those stairs, actually.
and it's a jump cut from the cheering applause to this never-ending staircase, which was designed by this, you know, architect Ivo Shandor, and it's kind of like, you know, it's the final boss. It's a soups. Let's just blow past it. Forget about it.
Well, the final boss,
It's the staircase.
once they get to the top, once they get to the top of the staircase, they have one more staircase to climb. And they climb that staircase, and
go up.
it takes them to Zool and the other dog, who is Rick Moranis. Oh, and they've turned into dogs by this point after they've had their sex. Louis Tully actually gets out into the streets and has like a whole journey he has to go on to make his way back to Dana, which I think is pretty funny.
Yeah, a lot of yelling.
I mentioned Janine before, but a cool thing with her character is that she starts to have this thing going on with Dr. Egon Spangler. You know, she starts flirting with him a little bit at the beginning of the movie, and she's like talking about how she thinks that it's good when somebody is what's the word I'm looking for?
Well read or something.
Well read. She thinks it's good when they use their brain a lot. You know, she's attracted to him because he's smart.
Yeah.
And she's like, "What are your hobbies? What kind of hobbies do you have?" Because she reads, and he's like, "I don't really read." He says, "Text is dead."
Yeah, print is dead.
Print is dead. I mean, yeah, my bad. Yeah, she asks him his hobbies, and he's like, "I collect spores, molds, and fungus."
An
Classic.
iconic line. And when I saw it this time, I felt like he was trying to shut her down. Like, don't be interested in me.
Yeah, maybe that's just like his expectation that as soon as she hears that, it's over.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that he's wrong. I don't know if they don't really have a final beat. She kind of disappears in the third act. I don't...
No. Well, she's there a little bit, like, she has a bit at the end where he comes out of the building and she's there to walk away with him. I think we're supposed to understand that, you know, they kind of get together, and it's nice. She is the one who is initiating all the flirting, and he's not uncomfortable with it, although it's probably hard to make heads or tails of what he thinks for a little while because he's just so stoic. But it seems like he gets into her at a certain point. You know, they're hugging, and I think that's a nice aspect of the movie, that Egon Spangler and Janine Melnitz get together.
Yeah, they have to deal with Louis when he's possessed, and it is very sweet. They're like, you know, they get to play parent almost, and he handles it really well. He's so gentle with this being that could be incredibly dangerous.
The Ghostbusters have him for a minute, but then Walter Peck comes in and like ruins everything, and like he gets away briefly while being possessed. And basically we don't want the Keymaster or the Gatekeeper to get together, because then it'll open up the portal to Gozer, right? But it happens, and even the Ghostbusters like, all right, we got to get this Keymaster and this this Gatekeeper together. And it's like, I don't know if that's such a good idea, and eventually they end up together, and this all happens. The portal opens like at the top of the tower, because it turns out that the person who made the apartment complex was like this crazy guy from the 1920s.
Ivo Shandor.
I'm glad that you have the name. And he started a secret society that worships Gozer. And so his whole apartment complex that he built is structured like an antenna that takes in ghostly energy. And,
I think this is a pretty cool idea for...
I do too.
You know, a ghost movie. It is pretty cool.
It honestly is kind of an inspired twist.
Yeah, at this point in the movie, we've already seen this big explosion of ghosts when it was released, and there's kind of a montage of all these ghosts in New York City. And
yeah,
that point, I really appreciate the variety of ghosts, and I
get
like
to see
all the different kind of rules that they might apply to. Like, there were some that were
Yeah,
just zombies, like, or skeletons.
for sure. And that comes back to the whole dead rising from the grave thing going on, because as Winston and Ray are in the car together, at one point they start talking about revelations, and how it kind of feels like we're at that point where, the dead are coming back from the grave. Maybe this is the end of the world. And so, like, we get a sense that, like, without the Ghostbusters, the world would have ended.
I do get that feeling.
Right, but I don't think that what they were doing to these ghosts was right. I'm a little bit more neutral on, let's get rid of this demigod that's going to destroy the world. I think that that's probably fair.
Well, I am a huge fan of Gozer, the Gozerian the Destructor. I think that their design is on fire. They're described as being able to choose their form, and as a non-binary identifying person, and then ghost.
Exactly.
I mean, now I'm a free-floating, full-torso vaporous apparition. I'm even more non-binary. I mean, I'm just vapor down there. But I think that, like, this David Bowie goddess showing up, the voice is so cool. I mean, I love the vibe, and being like, choose your champion that you want to fight against is the big kind of set up for the big finale.
Yes. So it says to them, choose your destroyer, basically.
I think it's choose my form, choose the form of the destructor. It's like I like as a ghost, that's so it felt really beautiful to be like, choose my form. I don't know. It was crazy. It was a crazy feeling.
Gozer played really fair with these clowns. Like, extremely fair. There's one point where they shoot lightning at all the guys, and they're like, die. And it's that scene where it's are you a god? And Ray's like, no. And then so Ernie Hudson gets to say, when somebody asks you if you're a god, you say yes.
Yeah, very famous.
Very classic. All these good lines, and
yeah, they are really good.
That's where the movie...
if this was the first time I seen the movie, there was a couple times, especially in the finale, when you don't, like, I was like, I can't imagine not knowing what's about to happen. And I think I am a little jaded. I am a ghost. It is, what do you expect from me?
For sure, but it's something else to think about the headspace of the person who doesn't know about the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. What must that existence be like?
It could be quite fun and surprising. It was... I felt a lot of sympathy for that Stay Puft. It didn't have too many facial expressions, but the one it did when it was being hit with electric fire was like a crying baby, and I was like, this is awful.
Well, Ray himself said, I tried to think of the sweetest thing I could think of that could never hurt me. And so he thought of the Stay Puft Marshmallow, because they're all trying to keep their heads clear so that they don't think of any form for the destroyer, but Ray can't help himself. It just pops in his head.
Everybody always says, Venkman's like explaining it to the characters and the audience. He's like, so if you think of J. Edgar Hoover, he will show up and attack us, and obviously, that should have been the choice.
It should have been J. Edgar Hoover showing up right after that.
You should have explained it in a way that didn't give an example.
I know, because immediately they're just gonna think that's like the white bear thing. Try not to think of a white bear, Vernon.
I'm thinking. What have you done to me?
Exactly, but they spray the Stay Puft Marshmallow with their streams, and it's not working great until they cross their streams, and then it blows up the state.
It is a fantastic...
Yes. The fantastic finale. And then after that, all the marshmallow, it covers all of them, but it also lands perfectly to cover Walter Peck, who is running down below, who happened to be watching down below, and he gets covered in marshmallow. So he gets to get dunked on one last time.
The famous story from that is that right before it, he's like, could that hurt me? All that shaving cream? And they're like, And they tried it on a stunt man, and it, it flattened him.
Oh, wow.
And so then
Like,
they,
oh,
I don't even know if that was him in that shot. But it is it's the villain getting his due just desserts. But
that's funny.
I don't see that at all. I think that he is responding. The reason he's such a dick to Peter Venkman is because Venkman is just so rude to him and hiding the nuclear reactor they have in their building.
Yeah, it is kind of all their fault. I mean, they make a big, to do about like if you shut this box off, it's gonna create a huge explosion. Okay, so you just built a containment facility that will always have to be on forever now. Basically, is what they've created, because it's gonna explode if you turn it off. And maybe they just shouldn't have made the box in the first place. Maybe they shouldn't have made the ghost prison. I want to talk about one thing that comes up in the montage, because before we watched this movie, we were talking about, those Ghostbusters, and you were like, well, I don't know, maybe I'll relate to the Ghostbusters. Maybe it won't be as bad as we think, right?
I thought I would.
But we're ghosts. We can't relate to the Ghostbusters.
Yeah, it's not a very pro spirituality. Like, it doesn't address people who have really deep connections with their deceased loved ones. None of these ghosts have problems that are holding them back, that are keeping them on the planet. The Ghostbusters don't solve these problems for these ghosts. They are busting. In the Ray Parker Jr. song, when Ray Stantz busts, he says, "Bustin' makes me feel good." I mean, they lined it up perfectly.
Yeah, and people joke about that line, but the whole movie is a dick joke already. I think it was intentional.
I guess so. The people that were haunting don't have stars, which Ghostbusters is on this month, and so they had to walk the arduous distance to put the DVD in, which had an amazing, main menu, but it was interesting to read the subtitles. Very informative. Speaking of reading, surprise, Jonathan, I did read 2 different novelizations of the movie
Really?
Ghostbusters. The people we're haunting left out both as their weekly ghost book that they flip one page of as they walk through the room. Well, it was a little hard to keep track, 2 books at one time. I definitely didn't get very far. They were both written one in 1984 and one in 85.
I'm surprised that there are 2. What is the reason for this?
The reason? Yeah, that would be a good fact for me to know. I don't know the answer to that reason. They were both based off the script written by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, and I also had to crack open the script because reading these 2 books and their intro was so similar. I mean, this is a very modern take, but I felt like I was reading 2 attempts at like an AI-generated chat GPT thing. Like, I don't mean to insult these actual humans in the 80s who wrote these actual books, but to see these, to then read the script and just see like how they would kind of use, I mean, it's not plagiarism because that's what they were hired to do, but it was just a little like, it was interesting. Wow. One of the books was in present tense and one was in past tense. Movie scripts are usually in present tense, and it was really interesting to read the difference there, especially as a ghostwriter. I mean, choosing a tense is one of the hardest things, and it was like, holy cow, I'm reading 2 attempts.
That's crazy. It was cool. I wonder.
But no fun facts. I didn't learn anything.
That's okay. Fun. It's just interesting already that there are 2 of them. Maybe one didn't do so well, and so they wanted another shot at it in 85. Maybe they thought, we can get some more merchandising out of this.
Last week I asked you if Ghostbusters was a spoof of Poltergeist, and you weren't so sold, but on the first page of one of the books it says, "They're here."
Oh my god.
And in parentheses it says, "to save the world." So it was like a direct spoof reference.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I guess a little bit of Poltergeist spoofing is going into the movie, but anyway, that's interesting.
I mean, they did a hotel. They did kind of a Shining vibe with Dana when she's possessed by Zool. She says kind of what Danny in The Shining says, where it's Tony, his his kind of alternate personality says, "Danny isn't here, Mrs. Torrance," and she was like, "There is no Dana, only Zool."
Right. Could be some Shining spoofing going on. I also thought of The Exorcist in that scene, so possibility some of that was going into it. Wow.
Yeah. Now's the part of the show called Dates. Fun dates. This movie famously came out in 1984. A
For
super
sure.
famous year for movies. What movie, Jonathan? This was a stacked year. They had to double up. What movie came out on the exact same day, which was June 9th or something, maybe June 8th of 1984?
Oh, geez, I don't know.
Well, I will
Can
tell you,
give me...
it is. Oh, a hint?
Yeah, give me a hint.
Starts with the same letter. There's your hint.
Oh. In June 1984?
Take all the time in the world.
That is actually kind of a tough hint.
Steven Spielbergo.
Oh. 1984 with a G. It must be The Goonies?
All right, it's Gremlins.
Oh, see, I was thinking it's got to be something he produced. I guessed Goonies, but it's Gremlins. That's cool. That's one of my favorites.
Oh, that's good. That's good to know.
Yeah, we'll cover it one day, but it doesn't have any ghosts, so probably not for a while.
Maybe I could probably stretch some logic and reason and think about how there might be a ghost in there.
Yeah, you'll be like, it's the ghost of the Gremlins' parents. Like
Okay,
always.
all right. That's very funny. Because that is a legitimate reason to cover something, Jonathan. Another fun date. Super fun. You're going to love these. These are going to get even more fun. I didn't start with the best, and it's not downhill from here.
Okay.
The lady in the first scene who Bill Murray was running the test on, her character name was Jennifer. She was born April 1st. And the dean, who was like, "You are a poor scientist, Mr. Venkman," he was born April 1st.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of neat.
All right, last date in our segment of dates. Ivan Reitman, the director, was born October 27th, which is when we started the channel.
Wow. Wow. Look at that. Happy birthday a couple days ago, Ivan.
Yeah. Annie Potts, and this is just an extra one because, not an official fourth one. Annie Potts was born October 28th. That was a couple days ago.
Yeah.
So, very seasonal, my depression is. I'm sorry, what were we saying?
Well, we were talking about how your seasonal depression is cured by a good podcast outro. So Vernon, what?
Do you like this movie,
I
Jonathan?
do like. Yeah, I like Ghostbusters. It's a good movie. I'm not too threatened because I know Ghostbusters don't exist and they can't get me. But
Yeah, all the real world Ghostbusters are failures.
that's right. Sorry to have to say it, but y'all aren't doing too hot. Y'all are making parapsychologists look bad.
Of all the movies we've seen, I think this had a really good soundscape. I think the music was fantastic. It was not an offensive horror movie because it was probably a comedy first.
Right. So
and it wasn't too concerned with the tension.
It certainly was not. I'm glad to hear that you liked the music in this one and it held up. I still think that one song is bad, but that's just a taste thing.
Must be.
Yeah, you say out of all the movies we've watched, to make it clear, this is our technically third episode that we've recorded.
Right. We did The Shining, but it's technically lost media at the moment, but the things can change. We are ghosts. We're not one with technology.
Yes, we suffered some technical difficulties, which is understandable since we're just a couple of ghosts. What can you really expect? But we may be able to get that Shining episode out. If we're not, it'll be coming later down the line, probably.
We don't know what we're doing next. That's exciting.
We have no idea what we're doing next. You want to take a moment and figure it out?
No. My my god.
All right. Well, we're not gonna decide what movie we're doing next time because that didn't work out for us last time. So we'll see ya in a little while. Vernon, do you want to take us out of here?
Yes. Peace and love, everybody.
Peace and love.